on Twitter at Ann Coulter, and read online at anncoulter.com. And thanks so much for joining us.
Good to talk to you, John Phillips. How are you quarantining?
I'm bored out of my mind.
Really? I love it.
But you can't go to restaurants. That's what I like to do.
Yeah, I know. You can't do a lot of things. I know.
Are we killing the healthy chickens?
I think it's a little overblown, as you may have, not overblown, but I'm not wild about the mass quarantine measures, as you may have picked up from my Twitter feed. Not that it's not a serious virus, and main points that I think we can all agree on is screw China. Why did we turn all of our manufacturing over to them? They make all of our masks, but okay, let's put a pin in China for a minute. There are plenty of aggressive and even harsh measures that could be taken that wouldn't. It just seems like sort of a socialist solution. Make everyone suffer equally, even if you're not targeting what needs to be targeted. For example, I don't know if you saw this, but the Florida governor recently said anyone who flies in from the New York area will have his temperature taken when he arrives, and will be asked to self-quarantine, not stay with family, and so on and so forth for 2 weeks. The governor has contacted the president and said, we'd like to limit flights from New York to our state for a few weeks. It sounds wild and incredibly harsh, but it's a great idea. 60% of the cases right now are in New York City, where people live on top of one another. I think it's a great idea. I've always thought it's a great idea to wear masks. As you know, I always have masks with me when I fly. I wear them a lot during the winter months, or at any moment when I hear any cough or sneeze any place on the airplane. I think Americans are panicked enough right now that they'll engage in what I consider as your run-of-the-mill germaphobe, just ordinary protective measures. I'm so happy we may end the practice of shaking hands. Mask wearing should become much more common, and people should stop feeling embarrassed about it. But also, be very, very, very protective of the most vulnerable. The evidence seems to strongly suggest right now that it's mostly people over 70 or with certain, mostly respiratory or heart conditions. So really protect those people. Their family members. I saw this. This is a small step. This sort of thing. Target, Walmart, and Publix are allowing vulnerable people and old people only for the first hour they're open, to keep them extra protected. But just this generally, everybody shut down everything, no restaurants, no nothing. You're not even helping the ones who are the most vulnerable. And so far, it seems to be extremely contagious. But the death rate is luckily for us, pretty narrowly confined. Oh, and also that isn't to say that the 2 weeks of a quarantine isn't a good idea. 2 or 3 weeks. The president is now talking about 3 weeks. But this, I guess what I'm reacting to is the hysteria on cable news that, no, Easter isn't enough. Well, there are other considerations besides this one virus. And again, I don't mean to make light of this one virus. It's a terrible virus. I think it's outrageous that it was ever allowed into our country with our open borders, free travel, and outsourcing everything to China policies. It's a terrible virus, but there are other ways people die, and you don't want to talk to only the people who are experts on how viruses spread any more than you only want to talk to, emergency room doctors dealing with car accident victims, because then you'd shut down driving. We know, 30,000-40,000 people are going to die every year in car accidents, but we don't ban driving because there are other considerations. And if we fixate only on what, listen to the epidemiologists, or epidemiologist, sorry about that. There are trade-offs with everything you do, is what I'm saying, and I think we could be a lot more targeted as we come out of the 2 or 3 week quarantine.
Well, people also die from poverty, they die from hunger, they die from homelessness, and if you take away a person's right to make a living, if you say your industry is shut down and you're not going to get paid and that's the way it is, then you're going to make people sick. Maybe people are going to start taking drugs. Maybe they're going to become alcoholics. Who knows?
Yes, exactly. I tell a story in my column today from Arthur Miller, the famous playwright. He was objecting to a gas line that was going in, or proposed to go in, right through his nice little upstate New York town. And he said he was flying across the country once, sitting next to a geologist, and they were chatting about, the vastness of the American desert. And the geologists told Miller, well, no, actually, you could have people living out there. All you need is water. And Miller said, well, yeah, but how do you get the water to the desert? And he said, the largest reservoir in the world is located right under the Rocky Mountains. Yes, but how would you get to that under the Rocky Mountains? And the geologist said, you drop an atom bomb on it. Miller said, drop an atom bomb on it? What about the fallout? And the geologist said, oh, I don't know, that's not my field. That's what I feel like we're doing listening to the epidemiologists. This is their field. And as I quoted in my column today, Anthony Fauci, and I really bear him no ill. I'm sure he's an excellent epidemiologist, and though in the first part of my column you may think I'm making fun of him, but I go back to his quotes back when the same people, I might add, the government and the media were trying to scare us about heterosexual AIDS. Remember that? See Everett Koop, and, oh, it's everywhere now. Well, there's a quote from Fauci, among other quotes, saying that, oh, it's spreading beyond the usual populations here. And he also said, well, it might be spread by saliva, so we have to take the position. This was in 1987. It had been around for, about 5-6 years by then. We have to recommend against deep kissing because we think that could spread the AIDS virus. Now, as I say, yes, if you're an epidemiologist, and he says we've got to be on the safe side, we want to be extra safe. So we have all these, poor sorority girls and teenagers and undergraduates. Oh my gosh, we can't French kiss, we could get AIDS. Okay, that's a rational point if you want to be extra safe and if you are speaking as an epidemiologist. But can we hear from other scientists? Can we hear from other experts? I don't mean me, but the president and his advisors. We need to hear from a lot of experts because, as you say, there are a lot of ways people can die, go mad, destroy their lives, so on and so forth.
Well, we always talk about political bias, or sometimes there's a gender bias or a geographic bias, but there's also occupational biases. You talk to any airline pilot and you ask them, how often should the seatbelt sign be off? They say never, because that reduces their liability to zero if the seatbelt sign is always on and no one's ever walking around the cabin going to the lavatory. From their point of view, that's a perfectly rational position to take. But for the rest of us, we need to stretch. We need to go to the bathroom. We need to get stuff out of our bags. It's just what you have to do on a long flight.
Yes, I think that is an excellent comparison. And I notice the ones who are most panicking the nation into, and I'm not saying there isn't grounds for panic, it's just sort of, it's a little too diffuse, the panic right now. It's not targeted enough. I'm willing to not exactly blow up the Rockies, but shut down all flights from New York City and to New York City. That's actually a great idea for the next 2 weeks, and wouldn't be an enormous burden. I mean, except for obviously cargo flights and that sort of thing. But all the people who are pushing this diffuse panic on us, I notice, are not suffering from the quarantine. Perhaps it's a coincidence. But cable news hosts, no, they're still making millions of dollars. In fact, their ratings are going up, and they get to work from home. So in addition to hearing from people other than the epidemiologists, I'd like to hear from people other than those making money off this particular panic.
Well, think about it. There is no more scripted TV that's being made by the networks or the cable companies or the streaming services. That's all been shut down. You can't watch any late-night shows. Those have been shut down. There's no new sports. Baseball isn't playing. There's no basketball games. There's no hockey. There's probably going to be no Olympics. So the news has a monopoly on new content.
Yes. Yes. And boy, are they scaring us. And, it's good to be scared because once, and I hope it's sooner rather than later. I mean, the other point of my column today was because, a 3-week, total shutdown, quarantine in place order, which has pretty much gone down throughout the country. Okay, that's a good idea. Fine. But at some point it's got to be lifted. And I started thinking, it's never going to be lifted because no president, no governor, no mayor is going to lift it and then have every subsequent coronavirus death blamed on him.
No, it's the pilot with the fasten seatbelt sign. They have zero liability if they shut everything down for as long as they can. Zero.
Yes. Yeah.
And there is liability if they open it back up. Now, let me ask you this question. We're going to have to take a break before you can give us your answer. But tell me if I'm tinfoil hat conspiracy theorist with this. I'm looking at the power that these governors have now, where they can shut anything down. They can literally cut off your water, cut off your power if they think that you shouldn't be open. And they can send police in to shut down bars, shut down restaurants, lock the door. Whatever they want to do, they can do. We're pretty much one step away from martial law. Am I right to look at all of this and say, if the AOCs of the world take over government, God forbid, and they were to say, you know what, there's a state of emergency on global warming, or there's a state of emergency on gun violence, we need the power to step in and shut down entire industries or shut down entire geographic areas. And look at when we did it for this virus, we absolutely have the legal authority to do it for future emergencies, and this is an emergency, and this requires us to act in this sort of manner. Your answer coming up. You can get Ann online at AnnCoulter.com. She's got a brand new column out. It's called How Do We Flatten the Curve on Panic? Check it out at AnnCoulter.com. Right now, it's time to take a look at the roads. It's 1:25 on the John Phillips Show, Talk Radio 790 KABC. We're joined by Ann Coulter, who you can follow on Twitter at Ann Coulter. And so am I right to be worried that these powers will be exploited in some future event or some future non-event by politicians to do whatever it is that they want to do?
I don't think it's crazy. I think it would be harder with global warming. I mean, this virus is killing people. And most people, I think, who believe in the more extreme global warming predictions are doing so only because they don't want to be yelled at, because we've been hearing the world will end tomorrow for going on 30 or 40 years. When did Gore write An Inconvenient Truth? Wasn't that 20 years ago? If we don't take these actions immediately, the oceans will rise, Florida will be gone, the New York Public Library will be flooded, and Jake Gyllenhaal will have to hide out there. And we don't do it, and nothing ever happens. So I just think every day that we don't do anything, people become a little more cynical about global warming in particular. I am amazed at the power of the media. Yes, this is a very contagious virus, different, but it hasn't killed as many people as the flu so far. Now, obviously, we expect a lot more Americans to die of coronavirus, but I mean, gosh, we haven't shed any tears over it. What is it, like 23,000 Americans have died of seasonal flu this year, and I suspect a lot a lot fewer of them were in the 70 to 100 age bracket. The seasonal flu affects other ages. I mean, that's one advantage we have with this Chinese virus, that it does focus on the already ill in particular ways, or the very elderly. The media's power, though, is not only the media, but in the media pushing for the Democrats. I am a little worried that this is the sort of thing where the media could push more and more nationalist measures. I mean, this idea that that Trump should have somehow anticipated this and ordered 300 million masks last year, or whatever we need, 10 million ventilators. The people or the entities stepping up and providing things for us, I wish so many of them, the manufacturers, were not located in China and India. Really wish that our masks and respirators were already being made right here in America. But when you have, the Haynes Corporation stepping in and saying, hey, we have the technology, we can start making masks, I would much prefer Haynes to be responsible for making those masks than the FDA. I mean, I don't understand why people don't notice this. That all of the hold-ups in testing, it's generally the government bureaucracy slowing things down. We're not the fast, nimble country we used to be, and that isn't, I think, because we've become less fast or nimble. I mean, individually, it's that government bureaucrats are not known for their speed and efficiency.
Well, and the fear of litigation.
Yeah,
they're scared to death that if they put something out that's not 110% accurate, that the lawyers are just going to shut everything down and bankrupt everyone.
Absolutely right. Great point. I mean, that's part of the reason, and should always be remembered, that is a big part of the reason so much manufacturing has left the United States of America to go to our enemies. I mean, China, not only are they sending us products that are, laced with poisons, not what they say they are, kill the household dog, poison Americans. I mean, there was the drywall, there was the dog food. There's so many examples of this. But beyond that, I mean, if we go to war with China, they make most of our steel. Are they going to say, well, okay, we're at war, but don't worry, we'll keep supplying you with steel? No, of course we should be making all of our own stuff here. Now, but as you were just saying, and I think this is a very, very important point, yes, there are a lot of regulations. There are OSHA regulations and FDA regulations, and workers' comp regulations. But I think the biggest reason for outsourcing is you don't have to worry about BS lawsuits in other countries, and you do in this country.
Ann Coulter is joining us for the whole hour. If you want to weigh in, 800-222-KABC, 1-800-222-5222. If you haven't yet, go read her column right now. You can get it at anncoulter.com. The title is How Do We Flatten the Curve on Panic? We're joined by Ann Coulter, who you can follow on Twitter at Ann Coulter. Ann, you spent some time in the last segment talking about how certain states are putting travel restrictions on plane flights and travel from other states that are hotspots, including New York City. I want to go through the timeline of travel bans internationally when we recognized that there was a serious problem in China and when we recognized that there was a serious problem in Europe. The first country that got hit hard in Europe by this virus was Italy. And they were very slow to ban travel. And there are plenty of nonstop flights from Wuhan to Florence because those two areas do a lot of business with one another. But they took a long time to ban the travel because they didn't want to be seen as racist. After they finally did it, and they did it late, the mayor of Florence, in response, on February the 1st, encouraged Italians, including elderly Italians, to hug a Chinese person as a stand against racism after the prime minister announced travel restrictions on China. They were told to touch people physically who just got off the plane from Wuhan to prove that they weren't racist. Back here in this country,
that's great. Fantastic.
Back here in this country, President Trump banned travel from China. In my opinion, it was a couple of days too late, but he did it before everyone else was saying he should do it. In response,
was called the racist for it.
That's right. Here's what Joe Biden had to say. We're in the midst of a crisis with the coronavirus. We need to lead the way with science, not Donald Trump's record of hysteria, xenophobia, and fear-mongering. He is the worst possible person to lead our country through a global health emergency. And then later on went on to say, we have right now a crisis with the coronavirus. This is no time for Donald Trump's record of hysteria and xenophobia, hysterical xenophobia, and fear-mongering to lead the way instead of science. It wasn't just them, Ann. Here's what the New York Times ran on February the 5th. Who says it's not safe to travel to China? The coronavirus travel ban is unjust and doesn't work anyway. Then the health commissioner of New York City, her name is Oxirius Barbot, tweeted, quote, "Today our city is celebrating the Lunar New Year parade in Chinatown, a beautiful cultural tradition with a rich history in our city. I want to remind everyone to enjoy the parade and not change any plans due to misinformation spreading about coronavirus." That is the health commissioner for the city of New York telling their residents to go to this parade, gather in large numbers to celebrate the Lunar New Year.
That was a magnificent reading, John. That's fabulous. You should put it in the column so that I can refer back to it. Two things that liberals say in particular that should always get your antenna up. One is when they start bandying about the word science. Listen to these scientists. No, they're never talking about science. They're always talking about PC. I have an entire chapter in my book, Godless, My Entire Life, who has opposed science. The science of IQ, the science of differences between men and women, the science of how AIDS gets transmitted, the science of cancer clusters and all these other, crazy hysterias the trial lawyers give us. Liberals talking about science is like liberals talking about scripture. And the other one that sort of made me giggle just now, I forget which one said it. I think it was the New York Times editorial that banning travel from China, it's immoral, it's a xenophobic, and it just doesn't work. I always, the same thing they say about a wall. Immoral, xenophobic, and it just doesn't work. Well, if it just doesn't work, would you mind if we tried? Because, no harm, no foul if it doesn't work.
Well, they were also saying it was racist to ban travel from Italy, but not from England. But the problem's in Italy. It's not in England, or at least it wasn't when they issued the ban.
Yes, and England is our mother country. I was totally in favor of that. In fact, I think I assumed at the time that the only reason Trump excluded England was to annoy liberals, and I approve of that.
Now,
that was all they talked about after he held that first press conference saying he was banning travel from Europe except England for devoted MSNBC viewers, such as myself. You wouldn't have known that Trump had said anything else in that press conference. I think I missed it live. All they could talk about was, and why is there an exception for England?
Now, here's the question. Would he have done it had they gone the other way on Brexit?
Yeah, and one other thing about Italy and that moronic mayor saying go out and hug people, and incidentally, in my defense, to anyone I've ever hugged, hugging is more sanitary than a disgusting handshake. Fist bumping is way cleaner than a disgusting handshake. So it's not that I'm touchy-feely. I'm just trying to avoid a handshake. But if we could just bow or wave, I'd be fine with that too. Speaking as your run-of-the-mill germaphobe. But it's also noticeable that the region of Italy that was hit hardest and continues to be hit hardest by far and away beyond the rest is Lombardy, which has the highest proportion of Chinese immigrants. And yes, I know viruses have no nationality, but see, their carriers do have nationalities, and this virus came from China. That is part of what makes people like me, and I think a lot of people, very cynical about the information we're getting, that we're not getting information like that. Why won't they give us ethnic breakdowns? We do know that it seems to hit, for one thing, older people, but for another thing, men more than women. So can they tell us what percentage of these, quote, Americans are Chinese Americans? Because they are more likely to have contact with friends, relatives, visitors from China. And again, that's where the Chinese virus comes from. There was just a report on New York City, which, as you know, has an enormous number of the coronavirus cases that exist right now. I think it's in the country. I think it's about 60%. I read this morning that the one borough hit hardest was Queens. So looked up the demographics. Yep, they have the most Chinese immigrants. Will they tell us that? Will they tell us about all the young people dying? Can we find out about their vaping history? As you know some of them yourself and interview one of them quite frequently. I have a lot of friends who are doctors, and they have been screaming about this vaping trend for years and years. And I just tweeted out during the commercial break. Remember when that was a huge health crisis that everyone seems to have just forgotten about it? And that is the vaping crisis. These young, healthy kids, football players, they vape, and not very long either. That maybe once, maybe for a week, and they get rushed to the emergency rooms. Their lungs are completely shot from the vaping. That was a huge, major story just a few months ago. May we ask, of the people under 50, under 60, who are dying of coronavirus, not that many so far, but do we know anything about their vaping history? And what other medical problems were at issue? I think that's an important thing for us to know, because if you do have these, I was looking at the latest figures out of Italy, and apparently what Italy did was anyone in a hospital who was tested for coronavirus and then died was said to have died of coronavirus. But they were in the hospital, 88% of them, roughly something like that, 80% of them, for something else. They were in the hospital for hypertension, for diabetes, for other contributing causes. So we don't know that the coronavirus killed them. That was one thing that was present. But that's a useful piece of information. That's news we can use. So if you have any of these things, be very careful. Maybe you should be self-quarantining and absolutely wear a mask and don't shake hands and wash your hands a lot. That's useful information, but they won't tell us that because they want everyone to stay home.
Absolutely. And they keep talking about that nursing home facility in Kirkland, Washington, where they make you think, oh, it's perfectly healthy grandma who got it and died. Well, it's a nursing home facility that also has a hospice attached to it, and the deaths came from the hospice. But that part is withheld. Ann Coulter is joining us. 800-222-5222 is the telephone number, 1-800-222-KABC. You can get her online at anncoulter.com. This is Talk Radio 790 KABC. It's 1:51 on the John Phillips Show, Talk Radio 790 KABC. The Coronavirus Task Force is expected to give us a briefing any minute now. As soon as they begin speaking, we'll go live to the White House. We're joined by Ann Coulter, who you can follow on Twitter at Ann Coulter. And here in Los Angeles, one of the things that LA County is doing, because they say they have to prevent the spread of coronavirus, is they're letting huge numbers of people out of county jails. They've also tried to shut
we
down...
are getting everything on the left-wing wish list.
Yeah, no kidding. And they shut down the gun shops because they say that with everyone stuck at home, what's going to happen is people are going to end up shooting their spouses. So we don't want anyone buying guns.
But they can still drive their cars.
That's right.
That's never, ever, ever, ever happened. Every time a state, the first one to go, I think, was Florida, starts with very liberal, in the good sense, concealed carry permits. We always get all the experts coming out saying, oh, people are going to shoot one another in road rage incidents. The entire state is armed. Well, the entire state is armed, and crime has been dealt a serious blow. There have been no shootings and road rage incidents, and I am, for most of my life anyway, a New Yorker. Don't drive a car, and when I do, as you know, John, I'm a terrible driver.
You're not any worse than I am, which you actually have an excuse because you grew up in New York. I've grown up and lived in California my entire life. I have no excuse.
So as a consequence, when I first started going to L.A., I was terrified every time I was in a car with one of you people. It's like being on a roller coaster, and you're all, chit-chatting, going up the Hollywood Hills, whipping around corners. So that's why I mentioned cars, because if people were likely to kill their spouses or kill one another in road rage incidents, almost all Americans have a deadly weapon right there at their disposal. It's way easier than a gun. You don't even have to get close to the person. Just step on the gas. But they're not taking our cars away. So no, we're just getting everything on the liberal wish list. As for releasing prisoners or inmates, jail inmates, that's a fantastic idea. That's just great. But I love this that law-abiding people with jobs, the only way to keep them safe is to quarantine them. But criminals who are already quarantined, let them out.
Well, here's another one you're going to love. Only essential services are open in the state of California, which means if you need to get your hair cut, you can't get your hair cut. If you need to get your nails done, you can't get your nails done. However, you can go buy your marijuana because that was declared to be an essential service.
And I bring up again the vaping issue and the pot issue. I just want the full facts on who it is who is dying or being sent into the intensive care unit, because, it is rather striking that the figures out of Italy show 0 deaths under the age of 30. 0. And precious few under the age of 50. This isn't accounting for what other medical conditions the people between the ages of 30 and 50 had. Not that many even in the 60s age bracket. And again, as you get older, you get more medical problems. Diabetes, hypertension, that sort of thing. But 0 deaths under 30. We seem to be having deaths. I think I just read about one in L.A. The first teenager's death, a 17-year-old in L.A. And I'm absolutely not saying, I don't think anyone but an idiot, but liberals may listen to your program, would think this. I'm not saying anybody deserves this, but this is news we can use to know, oh my gosh, stop vaping. Or if you have been a vapor, you're at greater risk, that sort of thing.
Ann Coulter, thank you so much for joining us today. Always a pleasure.
Good to talk to you. Look forward to the journalists at the press conference.
Sitting very close to one another, not separating themselves by 6 feet.
Best part of my day.
You can read Ann's column online at AnnCoulter.com. How do we flatten the curve on panic? And you can follow her on Twitter at Ann Coulter. The coronavirus task force is going to give us an update any minute. We'll go live to Washington as soon as they begin.